Unexpectedly discharged from the hospital, I returned home to find my husband lounging arrogantly, and next to him was a woman with a triumphant expression.
A woman who can't even bear children is useless. Let's get divorced. Actually, you've wasted my time, so you should go pay me $50,000 in compensation.
I had long been fed up with my husband, but I never thought he would be this slow. However, the thought of being able to leave such a husband for $50,000 seemed almost like a wish granted. Well, not that there's any reason for me to pay him compensation. Fine by me. Here are the divorce papers. I won't pay any compensation, but I agreed to the divorce. I'm utterly sick of coming home to a man like him. And turning my back on my husband, who was signing the divorce papers with a smile, and the woman who was cheering him on, I started packing my things. I suppose they both feel on top of the world right now, but they will surely come to regret this soon enough. My name is Mary. I have always been an energetic person. At my company, I was always active, contributing ideas, participating in projects, and studying. I wasn't just focused on my work. I wanted a fulfilling personal life as well. I attended mixers arranged by friends and went to marriage parties, making efforts towards marriage. As a result, I met a man named Richard.
I fell for that personality of yours.
Richard seemed to truly love me and often took me out on dates. After a year of dating, we decided to get married. His parents lived in Texas, so when we went there to meet them for marriage greetings, they welcomed me with cheerful smiles. Richard's mother couldn't move around well freely, so considering she didn't want to travel far from Texas, I suggested to Richard that we hold our ceremony there.
Huh? Go out of our way for my mom? I don't think that's necessary. It's her fault that she can't move around freely. We don't need to compromise because of that.
Maybe Richard, living with his parents, knew his mother's condition wasn't as bad as I thought, but his words upset me. I believed it was natural to show consideration for someone with issues like hers. Yet Richard showed no consideration. Instead, he bluntly said that since it was his mother's personal issue, we shouldn't bother. However, not wanting to argue before our important wedding, I refrained from going against him. I said, "Well, my parents have never been to Texas, and I'd love to take wedding photos with the beautiful nature in the background." Upon hearing these reasons, Richard agreed, and we decided to hold the wedding in Texas. His parents realized that it was because of me, not Richard, that the wedding was held in Texas. They thanked me instead of Richard. Richard's mother, holding my hand, thanked me.
If it were just Richard, he probably wouldn't have thought of having the ceremony in Texas. Thank you for considering me, Mary.
She also complimented how beautiful I looked in my wedding dress. Richard's father, standing next to his wife, also expressed his gratitude.
If the wedding had been in Seattle, I was planning to just see the photos, but since it was here, I really wanted to attend. Thank you so much, Mary.
Well, it seemed Richard never really understood why his parents were thanking me. At that time, I didn't fully grasp why Richard showed no consideration or empathy towards his parents, but I would come to understand this as we began our married life. You know that type of person who just looks good on the outside? They act like nice people at work or with friends, but once at home, they become lazy, careless, or arrogant. Richard was exactly that type. Right after we got married, the previously kind Richard stopped helping at home, leaving all the household duties to others. Having work and often being entrusted with major projects, I said to him, "Hey, I'll be coming home late for a while. Could you please make dinner?" Richard, frowning reluctantly, replied,
Huh? Why do I have to make dinner? If you're working late, that means you're doing overtime, right? That just proves you're incompetent. Don't make me clean up your mess.
Excuse me? Clean up my mess? Indeed, if one is given a day's work and fails to complete it by the end of the day, it might be due to inefficiency. However, in my case, the new project involved meetings with overseas clients, and due to time differences, these meetings happened after regular hours. Even as I tried to explain this, Richard let out a heavy sigh and said,
I never knew you were such an incapable woman. Can't believe you can't handle both household and work tasks.
While I was taken aback by his words, he continued,
Knowing you, you probably think you're capable and meddle in other people's tasks, causing trouble, right? Given your nature, I guess being nosy is just a part of your daily routine.
In reality, I am in a position to delegate tasks to others, but it seemed Richard didn't understand that at all. I remember talking about my job to his parents when we visited them in Texas. Apparently, Richard didn't remember any of it. His parents, living far away, occasionally called to check on me and remembered what I had told them about my job. I couldn't understand why Richard, living with me, showed no understanding of my work. However, Richard, convinced he was right, said,
"If your work is making you come home late, then prepare dinner before you leave or leave money for me to order takeout."
As it was almost time for me to leave for work, I didn't want to get into more trouble, so I left $20 on the table and departed. I thought I heard him say,
"That's not enough,"
from behind, but $20 should be more than enough for one person's takeout. What was he planning to order? Anyway, I had already realized that Richard pretended to be nice outside, but acted as if he was the boss of the house. He never intended to understand my job, presuming from the start that
women are useless at work, and you, unable to do household chores, are even more incompetent. An incapable employee who can't even serve tea properly. You must be poorly paid.
In his mind, I am the superior one in this house. The incapable Mary is the opposite. He had an immature mindset, but I had no intention of entertaining his immature behavior. Even when he said,
"A useless woman like you just troubles the company. Why don't you quit and take care of the house?"
I would respond, "Can you save your nonsense for when you're drunk? If you don't intend to understand my work, just keep quiet," and quickly left for the office. However, I didn't plan to continue this life for long. Having gathered various pieces of evidence, I was ready to make my move when an incident occurred. I collapsed. Working hard and being busy in my personal life recently, I got sick and had to be hospitalized. There seemed to be a problem with my appendix, requiring surgery and a long hospital stay. Lying on the hospital bed, I sighed and turned on my laptop. When I was admitted to the hospital, my company had contacted Richard, but he never visited me, nor did he send a single concerned message. When I played a video on my computer, it showed our living room, where Richard and a woman were cozily sitting on the sofa, watching a romantic movie like a couple. They were sitting very close to each other. This video was of our current living room. It seems Richard hadn't noticed the surveillance camera installed in our home. I had originally installed the camera because I wanted a dog, despite us not having kids after being married for a while. However, the camera was soon used for a different purpose. The purpose of the surveillance was to monitor Richard. While I was busy with work, he was bringing another woman into our home. This woman, seemingly declaring war against me, or rather, Richard's wife, deliberately left traces of her presence. She left her cosmetics on the sink and left her long hair in the bathtub drain. At first, I thought maybe she was unaware of Richard's marital status, but considering the deliberately placed cosmetics and my discarded toothbrush, it was clear she saw me as a threat. Given the obvious signs of cohabitation in our house, I doubt she mistook Richard for a bachelor. During my hospitalization, I received no calls or texts from Richard. It seems he was busy playing house with his mistress at home. However, I didn't confront him directly over the phone. I was steadily gathering evidence to bring Richard down. The timing of my hospitalization was good, as I was transitioning my work responsibilities to others and planning a long leave from work. From the hospital bed, I efficiently proceeded with my plans. First, I received the results of an investigation I had requested from a private detective, revealing the identity of Richard's mistress. Her name is Mina, a beautiful woman who seems to be a model. She apparently has other boyfriends besides Richard, though he seems oblivious to this fact. Next, I contacted both my in-laws and my own parents. After the divorce revelation, I'm sure Richard will soon realize his predicament. I decided to lay the groundwork so that he couldn't rely on anyone else. My in-laws, already fond of me, were saddened to learn of their son's betrayal and declared they would disown Richard. My parents readily agreed to store some of my belongings for a while, and just as I had sorted everything out, it was time for me to be discharged. Before leaving the hospital, I sent Richard a message. "I'm being discharged tomorrow." It was read, but remained unanswered. He must have been too busy with Mina to bother replying. At this point, his attitude no longer surprised me. Rather, I sighed at the realization of how poor my judgment had been in choosing a man like Richard. After divorcing Richard, even if I resumed looking for a partner, I doubt my own judgment. Despite these thoughts, I headed home to settle things with Richard. When I got home and said, "I'm back," Richard didn't come out of the living room. I thought he might not have noticed my return, but as I entered the living room, there he was, lounging on the sofa with Mina looking triumphant by his side. It seemed they were eagerly waiting for my return. As soon as I walked in and saw them, Richard, with a smug look, said,
"A woman who can't even bear children should just get divorced. Ha ha. Actually, you wasted my time, so you should pay me $50,000 in compensation."
I had long been fed up with Richard, but never imagined he would be this low. However, the thought of being able to leave such a husband for $50,000 seemed like a blessing. Not that I had any reason to pay him compensation. And to think he brought up the reason for divorce as inability to bear children? How foolish can he be? It's truly saddening to realize how bad my judgment of men has been. Fine by me. Here are the divorce papers. Regaining my composure, I spoke. I won't pay compensation, but I agree to the divorce. I'm utterly sick of coming home to a man like him. Richard signing the divorce papers with a smile and Mina excitedly cheering him on didn't faze me as I began packing my belongings. When I finished packing, Richard and Mina came to me with the completed divorce papers. Richard, looking self-satisfied, said,
"Now I'm rid of a useless woman like you. I'm marrying this beautiful Mina. Once we're married, we'll surely have kids right away."
Mina responded with a giddy, "Oh my, Richard, you're so bold." It was a conversation I could only think of as, "get a room." I ignored them, quickly received the divorce papers, and let in the movers I had called in advance, promptly moving out my belongings. At this point, Richard seemed puzzled.
"Wait, why are movers here already when we just talked about divorce?"
But Mina's excitement about finally being alone and hugging Richard made him quickly forget his doubts. Thus, I quickly moved out, but I wasn't going to just leave Richard and Mina for them to get away with this. A month after my divorce from Richard, I started receiving incessant calls from him early in the morning. Actually, I had already bought a new phone, transferring all contacts except Richard's to it, leaving the old phone at home while I went to work. When I returned home, there were over 100 missed calls. I stopped counting after 100. I thought, if he's trying this hard to contact me, why not try another way? But when he called again, I finally answered. On the other end, Richard sounded almost tearful.
"Hey, what's this all about?"
I knew he had many questions, but I wasn't sure what he wanted to know most, so I asked, "What do you mean?" He replied,
"You're demanding compensation from me? I got a content-certified mail. Aren't you supposed to be the one paying me?"
I was dumbfounded. He had blatantly cheated during our marriage, so I thought he'd understand the concept of paying compensation for his infidelity. Apparently, he didn't grasp even that basic idea. "You have to say sorry and pay compensation for cheating," I explained.
"But it's your fault, isn't it? You couldn't have children."
I sighed deeply. "I'm not infertile. Remember when we went to the hospital together? It turned out you were the reason we couldn't have kids."
"Huh?
Did you think infertility was only a woman's issue and you just ignored the doctor's explanation? It seems you didn't even understand why I took you to the gynecologist for tests."
"So, it's my fault? But that's strange. Mina says she's pregnant."
I shrugged my shoulders. According to the detective's investigation, Mina's cheating on you with other men. The father of her child is probably someone else. Besides, I can't imagine she'd marry you.
"Huh?"
"Well, you don't have money." Richard seemed confused by my words.
"What are you talking about? Now that the useless you are gone, my life will be even more prosperous. I've been living well so far, so now it will be even better."
You seem to have forgotten, but I was a manager at my company, led major projects, and I'm about to become the president of a newly established company. My salary is much higher than yours, and I was the one paying for our takeouts because you always made a fuss. The luxurious life you've been living was thanks to me. I've taken on various challenges and advanced in my career, so now my annual income is $800,000. Unaware of all this, Richard had asked me for a divorce. His salary has been the same since we got married, a mere $2,000. Considering Mina was involved with several other men, I couldn't see why she would choose to marry Richard. Richard, unaware of the reality, pleaded.
This can't be. Mary, it's not too late. Let's get back together."
but I just snorted and said, "Who would want to live with someone as incompetent as you? I have no intention of supporting someone who can't do housework or hold a job." He had called me incompetent, but the real incompetent one was him. I certainly had no plans to support such a person any longer. Afterward, he apparently stormed into the company where I used to work, not realizing I was already the CEO of another company. When he demanded,
"Bring out Mary,"
at my old company, they told him I wasn't there anymore. Refusing to believe them, he caused a scene and even broke a window. Eventually, the police were called, and he was taken away. Now he owes not only compensation but also damages for breaking the company's window. How pathetic. This incident became the talk of his workplace, and he's been talked about behind his back by his colleagues. Despite the negative attention, he continues to work there because of his financial obligations. He had to move out of the house we shared and now lives in a company housing. When I demanded compensation from Mina as well, I informed her parents and her numerous boyfriends about her actions. She ended up getting sued for marriage fraud, and she was severely scolded by her family. Now that her family is monitoring her every move, she's focusing on her job. As for me, I check the compensation payments every month and have decided to take a break from relationships, focusing even more on my work than before. I'm Emily, a 60-year-old housewife. Last year, my husband retired, and we've been spending our time together. But I felt it was a waste to do nothing at home, so recently I started working a part-time cleaning job in the mornings. I want to work and earn money while my body still allows. Besides, working outside allows me to interact with various people and helps alleviate loneliness. Emily, here you go. We had a lot of bell peppers and eggplants in the garden, so I'm sharing some with you. Wow, thank you so much. I'm so happy to receive so much. At the cleaning job, there were many people around my age, and I could talk about various things. Some were like me, having too much time on their hands, while others had 10 grandchildren and were quite busy. There was never a shortage of conversation topics, and I always enjoyed my time at work. I have 2 children of my own. My eldest son, John, works for a major automobile manufacturer. He has always loved cars and has said since he was a child that he wanted to work in the automotive industry. 6 years ago, he married Rose, a woman he met through an acquaintance, and now they have a 5-year-old daughter, Julia. Julia was born with a disability in her legs and has been living in a wheelchair. When she was little, it was difficult to find a nursery school for her, and I often took care of her. Initially, she seemed lonely, but now she says she looks forward to seeing me. She has big round eyes and adorable brown hair that's naturally curly. My daughter, Erin, moved abroad after graduating high school to attend university in the UK. She married a British man and now lives in New York. I'm proud of how well she's grown up. That's how my life has been, quite peaceful, but recently I've been facing a certain problem. It's about my eldest son and his wife. When I finish work and check my phone, there are several missed calls from my son. Hello, what's happened?
Mom? Sorry for the sudden request, but can you take care of Julia? Both Rose and I are busy with work and can't look after her.
The call was about suddenly needing me to take care of Julia. That's fine, but I just finished work and can't get there immediately. Even if I hurry, it'll take at least 30 minutes.
That's okay. Then, see you in 30 minutes.
Saying that, my son quickly ended the call. Lately, I've been getting a lot of calls from my son asking to take care of Julia. Rose works the same part-time job as me, yet she often leaves Julia with me even on her days off. According to Rose, it's because taking care of Julia, who needs a wheelchair, is tough. Indeed, caring for a child in a wheelchair might require a lot of physical strength. There are times when one would want to take a break. With that in mind, I headed to my son's house. When I rang the doorbell, Rose came out. Sorry, mother-in-law. Actually, 2 people at work called in sick with a cold. I really had to go. I see. That's tough. I'll look after Julia, so you go ahead and focus on your work. Thank you. Well, I'm off then. Not only was the increase in calls for my son concerning, but I also felt a certain discomfort towards Rose. Rose's job is supposed to be in a restaurant. Restaurants usually have strict rules about makeup, hair color, and nails. But lately, Rose's makeup has been heavy, her hair color bright, and she even has subtle nail polish. Not all restaurants prohibit nails, and some may allow them if the job is just to serve food. Maybe my way of thinking is outdated. I couldn't help but mutter to myself, "Julia, Grandma is here." Julia? What happened? That bruise? I was surprised to see a large bandage beside her eye and couldn't help but raise my voice.
"I fell from my wheelchair earlier and hit the table."
Fell? Were you trying to reach for something?
"Yeah, that's when I fell."
Julia was smiling while saying this, but she seemed pale. Could she have hit her head? I decided to ask my son about Julia's injury.
Yeah, I heard from Rose. Apparently, a butterfly flew into the room while she was doing laundry, and she fell from her wheelchair trying to chase it.
A butterfly? But I thought Julia didn't like insects. Did she really chase after a butterfly?
I don't know. Girls her age change their minds frequently, don't they?
But she looks pale. Shouldn't we take her to the hospital?
For something like that, no need to go to the hospital. It'll heal on its own. If she throws up or faints, then we'll take her. Otherwise, it's fine.
After saying that, my son, citing his busy work schedule, hung up. Doesn't he worry about his daughter's injury, whether a scar will remain on her face, or if her condition might worsen?
"Julia, if you feel sick, tell Grandma, okay? I'll take you to the hospital right away." "Thank you, Grandma."
When I went to the kitchen, I found that nothing had been prepared for Julia's meal. Looking in the fridge, there wasn't much food. "Julia, let's go to the supermarket nearby with Grandma. I'll push the wheelchair for you."
"Thank you. I'm excited to go out."
The supermarket was just a 5-minute walk from my son and daughter-in-law's house. Pushing the wheelchair wasn't a hassle for me. Julia said she wanted to eat omelet today, so we went out to buy the ingredients. As soon as we entered the supermarket, Julia's eyes sparkled, and she looked around excitedly.
"Wow, there are so many delicious things. I haven't been out much recently, so this is fun."
"What? You haven't been out? What has your mom been doing?" When I asked this, Julia briefly averted her eyes. Perhaps there was something she felt she shouldn't say.
"Lately, both Dad and Mom have been busy with work, so we don't get to go out much."
Julia's voice was soft, and she sounded a bit sad. "I see. You must feel lonely. If Grandma is okay, I can take you out any time." Hearing this, Julia's face lit up again, and she answered with a yes. When we got home, I made omelet for Julia. I used to make it often for my children, so I'm quite good at it. I topped it with fluffy eggs and drew a little ketchup art. "Here's your omelet. Be careful, it's hot."
"It looks delicious. Thank you."
Julia devoured the omelet I made. She must have been very hungry. She finished it quickly. Since she was still hungry, I made a second omelet for her. I wondered where all this food was going in her small body. Anyway, I was really glad to see her eat so much. Around 8 p.m., my son came home. Julia had already bathed and was fast asleep.
Sorry, Mom. You can go home now. I'll take it from here.
Okay. I have work tomorrow too. I can't answer the phone during work, remember? As I was about to leave, something Julia said earlier crossed my mind, and I turned to John. It's good to work hard, but remember to also spend some time with Julia, okay?
What do you mean?
Today, when we went shopping at the supermarket, Julia said that she doesn't go out much with Rose. Remember to spend more time with Julia. With that, I left my son's house. At that time, I casually mentioned this, simply hoping my son would spend more time with Julia. But since that day, I found it difficult to see Julia. I had received a lot of mandarins from a coworker and thought of sharing some with my son and his wife, so I tried to contact them. Hello, John. I got a lot of mandarins from someone at work today. I thought I'd share some with you.
Sorry, I'm busy with work. Maybe some other time."
With that, he abruptly ended the call. Even when I contacted Rose, I got the same response about being busy with work. Until that day, they used to rely on me for everything, but since then, I stopped receiving such calls. Did I say something unnecessary? Or did I do something to make them angry? Either way, I couldn't find out the truth, as I couldn't meet them, and time just passed by. 3 months had passed since I couldn't see Julia. The season had changed from summer to autumn. This happened when I was having tea with coworkers at a family restaurant after work. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was a call from my eldest son. Surprised by his call after such a long time, I hurriedly answered. "Hello, what's up? Is something wrong?" My colleagues, seeing me rush to answer the phone, looked tense and watched me.
Mom, sorry for the sudden request, but are you free the day after tomorrow?"
"The day after tomorrow? I don't have anything special. It's my day off."
"Really? Actually, Rose and I are planning a trip abroad, but it seems Julia can't come. Could you, sorry to ask, take care of her for 3 days?"
I answered the phone thinking something might have happened, but it was just a request to look after Julia like before. "Of course, that's fine. However, I have work that day, so I'll ask my sister to help. Is that okay?"
"Auntie? That's fine. I'll leave the key in the usual place."
"Got it then. Bye." After hanging up, I let out a sigh of relief. I had been worried, thinking something might have happened since there was no contact for a while. It turns out they just needed someone to take care of Julia for 3 days, which is no trouble at all. I was happy at the thought of seeing my granddaughter again after such a long time. 2 days later, I loaded the car with lots of groceries and headed to my son and daughter-in-law's house. Using the key hidden in its usual spot, I entered their home. "Julia, Grandma is here!" I called out as I opened the front door, but there was no response. Thinking she might be sleeping, I headed to the living room, only to let out a scream-like sound at the sight that greeted me. "Julia! What happened? What's going on?" Julia was indeed there in the living room, but she was different from the last time I saw her, looking thin and pale. Her hair was unkempt, and her clothes were dirty, as if she hadn't bathed. "Grandma, you came. Sorry, I'm so dirty." Julia gave me a weak smile upon seeing me. Shocked by her condition, I hurriedly called my son. "What's going on? Why is Julia bedridden? She's pale and thin." I couldn't help raising my voice in shock, despite Julia being right beside me.
She's been a bit willful lately. I told her if she's going to be that way, she needs to take care of herself."
"But to leave your daughter in such a state and go on a trip? You're her parent, aren't you? Don't you care?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing and became emotional. To think they would leave their bedridden child and go on an overseas trip so carefree. I was furious at his insensitivity. However, my son unexpectedly lashed out in a response to my words.
"Sure, you have experience raising kids, but have you ever taken care of a child with a disability? Do you even know how hard it is for us?"
"Even so, this is too much. How would you feel if you were treated the same way?"
"Oh, so annoying. If you're going to complain that much, why don't you take her in? Grandparents can adopt their grandchildren, you know."
After saying that, my son hung up. I was at the end of my patience and consulted my husband. I had always discussed matters about my son with my husband, but he believed that we, as elders, shouldn't interfere in the younger generation's parenting, so he had been silent. But he was unaware of this situation. My husband, who came with my sister's car, was shocked and in tears at the sight of his changed granddaughter. My sister researched and found out that grandparents can indeed adopt their grandchildren. With the parents' consent, custody could be transferred to us. My sister and I took Julia to the hospital. She was weak, but fortunately we found her in time to prevent anything serious. "Julia, if you're okay with it, would you like to live with us? Of course, if you want to stay with your parents, we'll respect that." When I asked Julia, she immediately said she wanted to live with us. After my son and his wife returned from their trip, my husband talked with them, and Julia officially became our adopted child. Julia grew up well with us. One day she learned about wheelchair basketball. Julia often said, "I want to move my body like everyone else." Hearing this, my husband researched and found a place where they played wheelchair basketball. When we went there to watch, the junior team was practicing. Watching them, Julia's eyes sparkled with excitement.
"I want to practice with everyone. I want to play basketball."
After watching the practice, Julia became fascinated with wheelchair basketball and later joined the junior team. Initially, Julia struggled to catch the ball and felt frustrated, but her skills improved rapidly. Having always watched her friends run around energetically with envy, Julia joined the junior team and discovered the joy and excitement of moving her body. For the first 2 years, she couldn't participate in matches and only watched her teammates play from the bench. However, her persistent daily practice paid off, and in her 3rd year, she finally made it into the regular team. She was overjoyed when she received her uniform for the first time, signifying her participation in a game.
"Look, it's the uniform only regular members get to wear. In the next match, I'll definitely score."
"Do your best. Grandpa, Auntie, and I will be there to cheer for you." For her first game, my sister, husband, and even my daughter and son-in-law from overseas came to support her. The excitement of her granddaughter's first match was palpable. On the day of the match, the opposing team was one of the strongest in the region. Her first game against such a formidable team, I couldn't help but worry. All I hoped for was that Julia would enjoy the game without getting hurt. But as the match progressed, our team was surprisingly holding its own against the strong opponents. The game was a back-and-forth battle, with each team taking and then losing the lead. In the second half, our team got a chance for a free throw, and the one to take the free throw was Julia. Her face, usually smiling, was now tense with concentration.
"Julia, stay calm. You can definitely make it."
I wasn't sure if she could hear me. All I could do was pray that the ball would go in. As the ball left Julia's hands, it went straight into the goal net. The moment her shot was successful, cheers erupted from our side of the stands. This ignited her confidence, and she aggressively went after the ball. Again and again, she shot towards the goal net. The tentative movements from the first half were gone, replaced by assertive play in the second. Time flew by, and the final whistle of the match blew. The result was a victory for Julia's team. They had won their first match, and against a strong team no less. This was a significant victory for the team. After the match, a large number of reporters gathered around her. Her performance in her first game was remarkable, fearlessly attacking time and again against a strong team. This event was even broadcasted on local news. At school, her friends said things like,
"I saw you on the news yesterday,"
and "You were so cool." She was delighted by these comments, which fueled her enthusiasm for practice even more. My husband and I, as well as my sister and daughter's family who came to support, all cheered for Julia with all our might. Although my daughter's family lives overseas, they came to support whenever they could. Amidst the support atmosphere for Julia, I received a call after several years from a certain person. The caller was none other than my son, John. At first, I hesitated to answer, but the phone would ring, stop, and ring again. After repeated calls like this, I reluctantly answered, and then I heard my son's nonchalant voice.
"It's been a while, Mom. How have you been?"
"What do you want now? There's nothing left to talk about with you."
"Don't be like that. We're family, right? By the way, how's Julia? I saw her on the news, and I was shocked."
"She's doing very well. She's working hard at basketball."
"Right. I was so surprised to see her, who used to just sit around at home, now excelling in basketball. By the way, about the interviews she's been giving, how much did she get paid?"
Suddenly, my son asked about the payment for the interviews. "Ah, I see. That's what this is about." He called because he thought he could get some money from Julia, now that she's become famous. Even after all these years, my son's rotten thinking hadn't changed. We haven't received any money for interviews, so coming to us won't get you anything. When I told this to my son, he didn't believe me and kept asking if we had received some money. His questions made me feel sick to my stomach. Just as I was about to hang up, he says something shocking.
Then return Julia to us. She's a golden egg. She'll definitely earn a lot of signing money in the future. We'll take good care of her then.
For a moment, I couldn't believe what my son was saying. Could a parent really speak such words? The more I listened, the more nauseated I felt. That's impossible. We've legally become her family through proper procedures. Even if we were willing to return her, it would be up to her, and she doesn't want that. At these words, my son became furious, repeatedly demanding Julia's return. When I asked why he suddenly wanted her back, it turned out he was in debt. After their extravagant lifestyle, they had accumulated a significant amount of debt. Despite it being their fault, they were trying to make Julia pay for it. I thought it impossible to let her live with such corrupt people. With that mindset, it's even more impossible to return her to you. Please, don't contact us anymore. It's a nuisance. Saying this, I hung up the phone. Julia, who had overheard the conversation, gave me a weak smile.
They haven't changed, have they? I'll never go back to people like that.
I'm sorry you had to go through this. My own son, he's such a disgrace. As I said this weekly, Julia came close to me.
Don't say that. I'm here because of Grandpa and Grandma and the aunts who supported me, so I will never go back to them.
Julia's face, now firm and confident, was completely different from when I first took her in. 2 days after I blocked my son's calls, he and his wife showed up where Julia was practicing. Everyone was surprised to see unfamiliar adults walk into the practice session.
Julia, it's been a while. Sorry for leaving you alone for so long. But it's okay now, right? Let's live together as a family again?
Mommy was always thinking about you, even when we were apart. But now you don't have to feel lonely anymore. Let's live together again, okay?
Everyone around was stunned by their remarks. Amidst the bizarre atmosphere, Julia stepped forward and said,
Thanks for coming, but my parents aren't you two anymore. They're Grandma and Grandpa. I don't want to live with you, so please, go back.
Hearing this, her parents were shocked. They seemed to have expected Julia to be happy and willing to return with them. But Julia boldly declared in front of everyone that she would not live with them. Her parents panicked and tried to persuade their biological daughter. However, she refused to listen, and in desperation, my son forcibly grabbed Julia's hand, attempting to take her to their car. Seeing Julia's reluctance, the coach, sensing danger, called the police. The arriving officers took my son and his wife to the station for questioning. Later, I received a call from the coach explaining what had happened. Thankfully, I had previously informed the coach about Julia's complicated background, and I was grateful for their decision to call the police. Subsequently, a restraining order was issued against my son and his wife, preventing them from approaching us. They had planned to take Julia back, seeing her as a golden goose, but their plan failed miserably. According to the police, their debt amounted to $60,000, a sum that would be difficult to repay. Even though they were my son and his wife, they faced difficulties at their workplace after being taken away by the police and found it hard to stay. My son resigned, and now they both work as temporary employees. They struggle with maintaining relationships at work and have been frequently changing jobs. Meanwhile, Julia continued to excel, leading her team to victory. After the tournament, she started receiving offers from professional teams. Time passed, and now she's in a professional team practicing harder than ever. Welcome back. How's practice?
I'm home. It was really tough. My legs and arms are so sore, but I'm working hard to contribute to the team as soon as possible.
The amount of practice she does is incomparably more than what she did in the junior team, but her face always shines brightly. I often think about what her life would have been like if I hadn't found her that day, thin and bedridden. if I hadn't taken her in. The more I think about it, the more horrifying it seems, and I don't regret the courageous decision I made. Hearing her express similar feelings reassures me that it was the right choice. As long as I'm able, I want to continue going to her matches and cheering for her play.
I am Allison. I was a career woman, dedicated to my job, but even someone like me managed to get married. Unlike me, my sister, known as a love expert, often ridiculed me. But now, I feel like I've finally achieved the happiness of an ordinary woman. However, this was a delusion. As a woman, I was naive, which led to a terrible situation. I was never the type to be involved in romantic rumors since my student days. You could say I was serious and disliked dishonesty, but maybe I was a bit too extreme. My personality is rigid and a bit fussy, which could be seen negatively. Because of this, I was inexperienced in love during middle and high school. And even in college, I never had a boyfriend. However, this trait became an advantage when I started working. I joined a major financial company and was recognized by my superiors for my strong sense of responsibility. I was entrusted with significant tasks, even causing envy among my male colleagues. This recognition made me happy and motivated me to work harder, leading to rapid career advancement. I even attained higher positions than my seniors. I always treated my seniors, juniors, and bosses with great importance. I knew that my work thrived because of them. So, I believe I earned the trust of all generations within the company. Yet, as I approached my 30s, I couldn't help but think about love. Despite being successful and well paid, something was missing in my everyday life. Then, I met Sean. It happened when I went out for drinks with a junior colleague at a bar. Sean often visited the bar alone. He worked for a major company with global branches and had a significant income. In the end, even without me asking, Sean himself revealed, "Well, if you talk about annual income, it's around $300,000, I guess." Well, just happened to be. The bartender nodded in agreement, confirming its truth. Sean was a gentleman at the bar, attentively listening to our conversation. I secretly admired him, assuming he was married. A man like him, charming and wealthy, must be popular with women. But he was single and had no girlfriend at the time. Sean even took the initiative to ask for my contact details and suggested we go out for drinks together. Of course, I don't choose men based on their income, but as we dated, I fell for his generosity. Eventually, we got married. I couldn't believe someone like me married such a wonderful man. I was overjoyed. However, just 6 months into the marriage, I was shockingly brought back down to earth. I had never imagined such an unbelievable situation. Before dating Sean, I lived alone, frequently visited by my sister Becky, who still lived at our family home. She's almost the opposite of me. She prioritized love over work. Since her student days, Becky was popular with boys, often bringing them home. Our mother would say she knows how to attract men, understanding her charming points. At that time, I wasn't very interested in romance, so I didn't pay much attention to Becky, who was popular with men. However, Becky always mocked me for living a serious life, saying things like, "Sis, aren't you going to get a boyfriend? Life must be boring. And a woman's value is in how she uses men. And you're worthless as a woman because you can't do that." She openly ridiculed me since our school days. I was a bit irritated by her remarks, but managed to shrug them off as youthful folly. However, as Becky entered the workforce, her attacks on me intensified. When she visited my apartment, she would insult me by saying, "Men are all about money. My current boyfriend earns $100,000 a year, so he's okay, I guess. And what about you, sis? Still ignored by men because you're all about work? And women who only focus on work are worthless, and you should be making a man earn for you. Once, she even blatantly said. I ended up dating a guy who's been with a friend of mine since school days. Well, it can't be helped, he chose me, and oh, I feel sorry for my friend. And this guy earns $200,000 a year. And now, what should I make him buy for me? It was shockingly disrespectful. Becky always judged men by their money and was desperate to prove she was popular. She wanted to throw that in my face because she never achieved results in studies or work. Perhaps, she was jealous of me for my accomplishments in these areas. She kept mocking me for my lack of romance, using it to vent her frustrations. But my eventual marriage only fueled Becky's jealousy. I really didn't want to tell Becky about Sean. He was exactly her type, a man with a good income, and he was also kind and gentlemanly. I worried that Becky might try something with Sean, even though he's my husband. After all, she's the type to steal even her friends' boyfriends. But I couldn't keep my husband a secret from my sister. As expected, when I mentioned our marriage, Becky persistently inquired about Sean. Moreover, Sean and I were planning to buy a luxury apartment. Foolishly, I mentioned this to Becky, making it obvious that she would take an interest in Sean. My worries became reality. Becky, while pretending to get along with us as a couple, suggested making a group chat with the three of us. I didn't understand why she wanted to do this, but I couldn't refuse as her elder sister. In the end, the group chat remained unused. However, Becky secretly connected with Sean on a personal chat, communicating without my knowledge. Honestly, I was too preoccupied with work to notice these things. Months into our marriage, around the time we bought the luxury apartment, everything suddenly changed. We had just settled into our new apartment, and I was looking forward to enjoying our new home. One day, I returned home earlier than usual from work, expecting to find an empty house. But when I entered the living room, I saw an unbelievable scene. Sean and Becky, disheveled and embracing. Allison. Why are you back so early? Sean, starting to speak to me in a rush. But really, I'm the one who should panic. First of all, why are you two here together? And what were you doing? I asked reflexively. Sean just broke into a cold sweat. But Becky, without any shame, bluntly said to me, you found out. No choice but to tell the truth. Sean and I are actually in a relationship. So, sis, I'm sorry, but could you break up with Sean? Faced with Becky's outrageous claim, I was too shocked to say anything for a while. I had some concerns, but I couldn't believe this was actually happening. There was just silence in the living room. Finally, I confronted Sean. Did you really have an affair with Becky? When I asked, Sean looked down and said, yeah, I feel bad about it, but... As I talked more with Becky, turns out she's pregnant now. I'm really sorry, but that's the situation. I felt a mix of emotions rising in my head, almost overwhelming me. Then, Becky added insult to injury, saying, it's such a shame you can't live in this nice apartment now. You're such a pathetic person. I feel sorry for you, but I can't even shed a tear. She spoke like a devil. I blurted out, what, in disbelief. Becky just laughed, seemingly pitying me. She must be thrilled. Having succeeded in stealing a man with an annual income of $300,000 from me. Sean, standing beside her, seemed like he wanted to say something. Becky, don't say whatever you like. But Becky, adjusting her clothes, stopped Sean and said to me, well, that's how it is. I'm moving here in a week. Make sure you're ready to leave by then. Wonder if you'll end up homeless? But maybe you can beg our parents to let you live here instead. how miserable, right? Going back home. Poor sister, how pathetic. Oh, and make sure to file the divorce papers soon. We're already preparing our marriage registration. And with a smirk, she left the house. She must be feeling great. But, unfortunately, Becky didn't know the whole truth. She misunderstood why I said, "What?" to her. I immediately filed for divorce as Becky suggested. There was no need for discussion with Sean, as he intended to marry Becky. The process went smoothly, with both of them agreeing. I informed Becky about it via chat. Sean might have been a bit confused. After all, I was the one being divorced, yet I showed no signs of sadness or anger. I just went on with what needed to be done. A week later, as promised, Becky came to our house. As I opened the door, Becky said, "I've filed for marriage registration and arranged for my stuff." A new home is wonderful. But why are you still here, sis? You should leave today. It's weird to live in someone else's house. She entered the living room, where Sean was sitting formally with his packed boxes. "Oh, you're already prepared to leave, sis. Then hurry up and go." Becky was as brazen as ever, but Sean hurriedly intervened. No. It's me who's leaving. It's us who are leaving." Sean's statement seemed to confuse Becky. He explained in detail. "You see, this apartment wasn't bought by me. It's Allison's money. The property is in Allison's name, so we're the ones who have to leave. These are my belongings." Upon hearing this, Becky was at a loss for words. "What do you mean? Even if Allison is good at her job, there's no way she could afford such a fancy apartment. It must be Sean's money, right? He earns $300,000 a year." But no matter how much she doubted Sean, the truth remained unchanged. So, I decided to tell her everything. It's true that Sean earns $300,000 a year. But it's about how much of that he actually keeps. Sean had always been a spendthrift, getting carried away with his high salary. He was addicted to gambling and expensive nightclubs. And he got involved with various women who made him buy them luxury items. In the end, they used him as a wallet and left him, a cycle he repeated. With a high-end car loan still outstanding. His $300,000 salary would quickly disappear given his spending habits. Worse, Sean continued his ways without remorse, accumulating a significant amount of debt that he was still struggling to repay. He had kept this hidden from me until just before we signed the contract for the luxury apartment. I was shocked, but I was foolish too. Due to my nature, a misplaced sense of responsibility kicked in. "Let's work hard together to pay off the debt," I had said. As for the apartment, I could afford it on my own. I had received a substantial raise at work and occasionally gave remote lectures on financial topics. Including that income, I was earning far more than Sean. Becky had no idea I was capable of such feats. But Sean's wasteful habits didn't change easily, and his affair with my sister was the last straw. I had been considering leaving him, and this revelation made up my mind. I was grateful to Becky for giving me the push I needed to leave such a hopeless man. As I explained, Becky was speechless, her eyes wide open. Then I delivered the final blow. "Since you two cheated during our marriage, I can claim compensation from both of you. Be ready for it, Becky. I won't go easy just because we're sisters. Actually, I don't feel any sisterly love anymore." With a laugh, I said this to Becky. "No, wait a minute." Realizing the reality, Becky's face crumbled. "Congratulations on your marriage, Becky. You've also inherited a huge debt. So, both of you, please leave my place quickly. Sean is a stranger now, and a stranger's wife is also a stranger. It's odd for strangers to be in my house, right? If you don't leave, I'll call the police." With a sarcastic remark, I felt refreshed. The two of them seemed to realize they had to listen to me and left the house dejectedly. Afterward, Becky was furious with Sean, calling him the worst and threatening to leave him. But when Sean mentioned the baby in Becky's belly, she lost it and said, "There's no baby. I just wanted his $300,000 income." This angered Sean, and he decisively chose to divorce her. As a result, Sean returned to a life chased by debt collectors. The story of his 2 divorces, especially involving his ex-wife's sister, spread around his workplace. He was looked down upon by his colleagues. Moreover, with the compensation to pay me and already being cash-strapped, his mental state deteriorated. His superiors decided he was a liability to the company and demoted him to a regular employee. Now he barely manages to live in his parents' house, scolded harshly for his actions. As for Becky, she was in a worse state. With low income and now burdened with compensation, she plunged into debt. Moreover, when she tried to return to her parents' home, it seems they didn't accept her either. They probably felt she went too far this time. To make her reflect, they seem to have imposed a sort of divine punishment, telling her to sort it out herself. She's living in a shabby apartment now. Still, Becky thinks catching a wealthy man is the solution. But she's living in poverty, hardly putting on makeup, and unable to do household chores like laundry and cleaning. Men she meets criticize her for being smelly and unclean, and currently, no one is really paying her any attention. Meanwhile, I'm enjoying life in my luxury apartment. Work is going well, with prospects of increased income. I host parties with colleagues and live a fulfilling life. At one point, a trusted junior at work confessed to me. He was always worried if I was overworking myself. Having learned from my experience with Sean, I felt confident this time. Now, I'm having very happy times. As my son's illness continued getting worse, my husband, Dan, started to be away from home more often. When our son passed away, Dan didn't shed a single tear. Instead, he shouted, "You did nothing but get in my way until the end," and punched the coffin. I want nothing to do with such a person. My hands, trembling with anger, held a letter from my late son. Now, let's begin the revenge he left behind. My name is Cindy. I'm a 37-year-old housewife. I have a normal family with a husband, a son, and a daughter. But my life changed when my son, Alex, turned 7. One day, just after starting school, Alex suddenly collapsed at school. He had unexplained headaches and vomiting. Rushing to the hospital, the diagnosis brought despair to our family. He was given 1 year to live. A rare and difficult disease with no cure. All we could do was medicate to alleviate the symptoms. Even though we could relieve the symptoms, we couldn't stop the progression. Alex grew weaker day by day, eventually becoming bedridden. By 3rd grade, he could no longer attend school. That's when my husband, who used to be kind and caring, started to change. He began staying out late and overnight without notice. When he did come home, he lashed out at me and the kids. I started wishing he wouldn't come home, seeing how irritable he was. The kids were scared of their father's drastic change. I didn't want them to grow up always watching their parents bickering at each other. So, on days when my husband didn't come home, I felt relieved. I didn't know what he was doing outside. Although my husband had recently been promoted and was genuinely busy, his constant absence these days were suspicious. "Mom, is Dad not coming home again today?" It seems so. Lisa, my daughter, also seemed to lack her usual energy during dinner. She's 8, an age when kids want to be with their parents, and I felt sorry for her. I was preoccupied with taking care of Alex, so I couldn't spend much time with Lisa. That's why I wished my husband would help. One day, After being away for several days, my husband came home. As soon as he entered, he threw his belongings and clothes around, instantly souring the mood of the house. Oblivious, he slumped onto the sofa and arrogantly demanded, "I'm tired. Hey, bring me some food. Dinner's still being prepared. Please wait a bit longer." What? Can't you at least have dinner ready when your husband comes home? How long have you been my wife? I'm sorry, but Alex wasn't feeling well today. Again? How much more will he get in my way? I couldn't stay silent at that. How can you say such things? He's trying so hard, despite feeling sick from the medication's side effects. He's trying to smile so as not to worry us. So what? Do you think that makes me happy? If he wants to please me, he should get healthy. That's cruel. How could he say such terrible things? Didn't he rejoice on the day our son was born? Holding our child in his arms, crying with joy. Has he forgotten that day? I wanted to speak but couldn't, wanted to ask but couldn't. Afraid of the vile and harsh words my husband might say next, I silently cried. Seeing this, my husband grabbed his coat. Enough. I can't stay in this gloomy house. I'll eat out. Wait. Please. Ignoring my plea, he left. The door closed mercilessly, and the room fell silent. Mom. Startled, I heard a soft voice behind me. Turning around, I saw Lisa standing there, looking anxious. Wiping my tears roughly, trying not to show them, I rushed to hug her. Dad just got back, and he's leaving again? Yes, that's right. He's busy. I see. She never voiced her loneliness, but I could feel her little body trembling. So, I hugged her tighter. It's okay, it's okay. Yeah. Lisa's small hand gripped my clothes tightly. My husband didn't return that night. After watching Lisa fall asleep, I went to Alex's room. Dad was angry again, wasn't he? Alex, who was alternating between hospital and home care, was at home today. I was relieved he didn't have to be hospitalized this time. But for my husband, it would have been better if Alex was in the hospital, which he calls out of his way. The kind, child-loving husband I once knew was nowhere to be found. I'm sorry. It's not your fault, Alex. You've done nothing wrong. But Dad is just a bit irritable because he's busy with work. He's working hard for our family. My son Alex, whose body is painfully riddled with tubes, seems comforted as I stroke his head. Despite his suffering and pain, he still manages to smile for us. He's a kind son, always concerned about us as parents. It's heartbreaking to see him trying so hard. I fight back tears and manage a small smile for him. You seem to be doing a bit better. Do you think you can eat something? Maybe a little. I'll bring some soup and grated apple. Just wait here. Okay. Mom? As I was about to leave the room, my son called out to me. Yes? I love you. His words caught me off guard, and the tears I had been holding back rushed to my eyes. I hurried out of the room in a panic. Alex's condition was fluctuating, but the disease was steadily progressing, slowly taking his life. One day, after a long absence, my husband returned home in a surprisingly good mood. Welcome home. You seem to be in a good mood, what's up? It's none of your business. His mood might be good, but his attitude remains poor. How's Alex? In the hospital again today? He's been home since yesterday. I had informed my husband about Alex's hospitalization through messages. He read them but didn't respond. It's been a long time since I've heard him express any concern for our son. Alex turned 10 3 days ago. Oh, really? It's not, oh, really? He used to remember before Alex got sick. We've been celebrating birthdays without him for years now. It seems like he's lost interest not only in Alex, but also in our daughter, Lisa. I wonder if there's any point in staying as a family with such a person. But with our children still looking up to him as their father, I can't easily consider divorce. Just as I was about to speak while he was still in a good mood, our daughter Lisa entered the living room. Dad. Oh, Lisa. It's been a while. I'm glad to see you're doing well. His comment, tinged with sarcasm, didn't seem to register with him. After hesitating, Lisa said, Alex wants to talk to you. Huh? Both my husband and I were surprised by her words. Alex wants to talk to me? Lisa nodded silently. He said he wants to have a man-to-man talk. If it were my husband in his usual bad mood, he would probably say something like, "Oh well," and ignore it. But today, he was in a good mood. Such a pain, he muttered, scratching his head, but still, he headed towards our son's room. That's good. I sighed in relief along with Lisa and asked her, "Do you know what this is about?" I don't know. I just heard Dad come home while I was in Alex's room. Alex said he wanted to talk to him, something about a man-to-man talk for the last time. What? The last time? Did Alex really say that? Does he understand that he doesn't have much time left? When the disease was first diagnosed, the doctor gave him a year to live. It's been 3 years since then, and he's fought hard. But the end must be near. I don't know what they talked about that day. My husband came out of Alex's room in a bad mood and wouldn't tell me what was discussed. Alex also kept it a secret, saying it was a man-to-man talk. Their behavior left me feeling restless. Then, a month later, on the rare occasion that my husband didn't stay out but went on a business trip, Alex's condition suddenly worsened, and shortly after arriving at the hospital, he passed away peacefully, as if comforting us, without any signs of suffering. My dear son, my first child, Lisa's big brother, Alex. No matter how many times I call his name, his eyes will never open again. I hugged my sobbing daughter Lisa, and we both cried out loud. But there was no time to grieve. I contacted my family and my in-laws. Both grandparents rushed over and broke down in tears upon seeing Alex. I entrusted my exhausted daughter to my mother and began handling various arrangements. Dealing with the hospital, arranging the funeral, the preparations were overwhelming. But it was better to be busy, to forget the grief, even for a moment. Trying to reassure my worried parents and in-laws, I forced a smile and kept moving. However, this was my first time experiencing something like this. And my spirit was utterly drained. If it weren't for the help from my father and father-in-law, I couldn't have managed. If my mother and mother-in-law hadn't taken care of the house and Lisa, it would have been impossible. What the hell is Dan doing? My father-in-law finally exploded in anger. He raised his voice over the absence of my husband, who should have been more involved than even me, his wife. He's on a business trip. A business trip at a time like this. I'll call him. With that, my father-in-law called my husband. I could hear him arguing with my husband on the phone. That means my husband must be in a bad mood. A feeling of dread came over me, and it turned out to be true. A few hours later, my husband returned, engulfed in an unmistakably sour mood. I was in the middle of an important business trip. What am I supposed to do if this ruins the deal? My father-in-law retorted angrily to my husband. Your son has died, and you prioritize work over his funeral. If that's how your heartless company operates, it might as well go under. Unable to respond, my husband glared at our son Alex in the coffin. Always getting in my way, right to the very end. Then, unbelievably, he punched the coffin. Naturally, he was beaten up by my father-in-law. Watching this, something inside me broke. Snapped. But now was not the time to show it. At least for now, I must hold it in. My husband continued to grumble, but he quieted down as the funeral began. And then, unbelievably. Oh. Alex. Why did you leave your father behind? He started to cry. Had he finally come to realize his loss? No. I clearly saw my husband secretly using eye drops and pretending to cry. His eyes weren't actually shedding new tears. To those unaware, he might seem like a tragic father, deserving of sympathy. I endured for now, but this was enough to solidify my resolve. And as the funeral neared its end, the letter left by Alex was to be read. A letter? There's a letter? It's Alex's last will. It was in his desk drawer, locked. Lisa told me about it. I had found the letter as Lisa told me and had read it, but my husband was surprised. What does it say? I'm about to read it now. Saying so, I stood in front of the microphone, bowed to the attendees, and began to read the letter. It was a letter impossible to read without tears. About how much he enjoyed his life. His gratitude. Words for his beloved friends. His thoughts for his grandparents. About his sister. And about me. Alex's life shone brilliantly. He left words of happiness and thanks. Love you. The words I once heard were written there many times. No matter how often I read it, tears flowed. Yet I chose to read this letter myself. Sobs could be heard from the attendees. While everyone was crying, there was one person who wasn't. Needless to say, it was my husband. He was dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief, but there were no tears. Did he realize that amidst all these words of gratitude for various people, there were none for him, his own father? It seemed the attendees noticed before he did. Cindy, isn't there a word for Dan? My mother whispered to me, her voice choked with tears. At that moment, my tears stopped. Yes, there is. I'm about to read that part. Right, I couldn't cry. Because what was coming was the most important part. To Dad. I raised my head and read aloud. Suddenly, my husband looked up, his face contorted. Did he see his son's image in his clouded eyes? What did he think would be said? What was he expecting? Praise for being a good father? Surely not. To Dad. If you want to cheat, please release Mom and Lisa from the hell you are giving them and leave. The moment I read it, the hall erupted in murmurs. But I didn't stop. Remember the day you talked to me alone, Dad? You were in such a good mood. You told me about your young and pretty girlfriend. You laughed and said it was a secret just between the guys. The murmuring in the hall intensified. Hey. What? My husband reached out in panic, but his hand couldn't reach me. My father-in-law grabbed his hand just in time. Held back by his father, unable to move, Dan watched as I continued reading. You said her name was Rita, right? You even showed me a photo on your phone of you two entering a hotel. Mom, there's plenty of evidence of his affair on his phone. Make sure to get it before it's deleted. What? In a panic, my husband reached for his cell phone in his pocket. But my father-in-law was quicker. He swiftly snatched the phone to check its contents. It's clear as day, he said in disgust, casting a cold gaze at my husband. Mom, I'm sorry. While you were busy taking care of me, Dad cheated on you. Leaving you, who was trying so hard, to do whatever he pleased. I can't forgive him. Don't joke with me. Who do you think has been providing for this family? My husband was furious, but my father put an end to it with, whose thanks to? It's because of me. You were employed because you're Cindy's husband. The money you earn isn't just for you to spend, it's for the family. I didn't hire you to cheat on my daughter. Ben, that's... Yes, my husband worked for my father's company. He got promoted smoothly, embarrassingly enough, partly because he was family. It would have been fine if he had worked sincerely. But apparently, that wasn't the case. I was shocked when I did an internal investigation. You said you were working overtime or on business trips. But you were hardly working, leaving early or even leaving work early every day. The evidence of you meeting your mistress is solid. Who do you think has been providing for this family? It's Alex, who bravely fought his illness with a smile, Lisa, who supported her mother while longing for her brother's recovery, and Cindy, who sacrificed herself for the family. What have you done? Don't ever act high and mighty again. Eek. My husband turned pale and fell to the ground at my father's scolding. By now, relatives had gathered around him. Everyone looked at him with disdain. Despicable. Inhuman. Scum of the earth. As the voices condemning my husband rained down, he began to cry. And then, I continued reading my son's letter. The dad I loved is nowhere to be found. What's left is a villain I hate. Villain, if you feel even a bit guilty, give the money to Mom and leave the house. Mom, I really wanted to protect you. But it looks like I can't do that anymore. Once I'm gone, please live freely with Lisa. Divorced Dad. I paused for a moment and then looked up. Please be happy. Your happiness and Lisa's happiness is my happiness. Tears rolled down my cheeks again, wetting the ground. The funeral hall was silent, with only the sound of crying. Lisa, hugged by my mother-in-law, cried out, "I hate Dad so much." At that moment, my husband completely collapsed. No one showed sympathy for him, despite his breakdown. Not long after the funeral, I divorced my husband. Thanks to Alex, we found plenty of evidence of infidelity. And my husband, having lost all will to fight, agreed to the divorce without much conflict. My father introduced a great lawyer, but it turned out we hardly needed one. My family, my wife, were always busy with the son. I felt lonely, he muttered, but I lost all sympathy for such a pathetic excuse. Who was really lonely? Alex and Lisa must have been lonelier. But I didn't bother scolding him, not worth the effort. Later, my husband paid compensation and child support in a lump sum. He had no money after pouring it into his affair, but my father-in-law covered it, apologizing for his son's actions. I gratefully accepted the money, but I didn't blame my in-laws. My ex-husband was a grown man, responsible for his own actions. It was all his own doing. Naturally, my father fired him from the company. Even after losing his job, my father-in-law refused to let him delay repayments and found him a job. It seemed to be a tough place, with no room for fooling around. While it seemed a bit extreme, there are all sorts of jobs in this world. I thought my ex-husband deserved to suffer. Lisa and I started a new life. It was hard, but remembering my son's brave fight, I found strength. 20 years later, in a hospital, a baby's cry echoed. Holding the baby was Lisa, now a mother. "I'll protect this child no matter what." She had the face of a mother, and I smiled, looking at the baby who reminded me a bit of Alex. It wasn't like a reincarnation, but I was glad Alex's bloodline continued. "Mom, I love you." I felt like I heard my son's voice and gently wiped my eyes.
We're divorced, and I'm the one who will be getting the money, thanks to alimony. You don't have any say in this.
Jack said that and left the hospital room. "Wait!" I yelled out, but Jack didn't seem to hear it and left the room. And that is how I became single, with cancer still plaguing me. But for some reason, the knot in my chest seemed to have untangled. Perhaps by this point, my love for Jack had already cooled down. Jack, who toyed with me and continually acted selfishly, deserves divine punishment. That's what I thought, and I began to plot my revenge. My name is Emma, a housewife in my 50s. I live with my husband, Jack. We don't have any children, and since our marriage, I believed we had been supporting each other. At least, that's what I thought. However, a chasm had formed between Jack and me, one that might never be bridged. My ideal image of a married couple is that we still stick together through good and bad, supporting and sometimes even challenging each other to be better. But there was none of that between us.
Hey, where's the food? I'm in a hurry here.
I had been out on an errand. When I came home, Jack, who had the day off, peeked out of his room and demanded his meal. There's no day off for a housewife. If I slack off for even a day, our daily life would become unsustainable. Jack, a regular office worker, has his days off, but he would only use those days for himself. Even when I was swamped with tasks in our 30 years of marriage, Jack never once helped out.
Housework is a housewife's job, isn't it? Doing your job without slacking off is just what's expected of a working adult.
That was Jack's stance. Even when I was feeling sick, Jack never allowed me to take a break from housework. There were times when I was down with a cold, finding it difficult even to get out of bed. But even during such times, when mealtime approached, Jack would come to his room and demand,
"Where's my food?"
He never showed any intention of taking care of me when I was sick. On the contrary, he would say,
"I have plans with friends."
Leave the house alone, go out drinking with friends until late, and come back home drunk. There was no love or support between us. However, Jack and I had vastly different understandings of what a marriage should be. I tried various ways to bridge this gap in our early days of marriage, but no matter how much I tried to talk to him, Jack never admitted he was wrong. He would sharply rebuke me, saying,
"Don't complain, you're just a housewife."
My love for Jack had long since cooled. It's not that I wanted to rely on Jack. I'm a human being too, and have my hard days. I just thought he could support me during those times. But Jack never showed any empathy. From the moment I realized this, the distance between Jack and me continued to grow. Gradually, I didn't even feel like confronting Jack, and as days went by, I even began to dread facing him. Our cold marital relationship. I knew better than anyone that there was no good in continuing this relationship. Amidst all this, something unusual happened to my body. While I've always been prone to falling sick, this time I felt something was clearly amiss. I contacted my father, who was at my ancestral home, and he took me to the hospital. The doctor diagnosed me with cancer. Fortunately, it was detected early, so there was a chance of recovery. Wanting to get started on it as soon as possible, I asked my father to bring the essentials from home, and I immediately went through the admission procedure. Jack was at work, so I briefly informed him via message that I had been diagnosed with cancer and was being admitted to the hospital for treatment. To be honest, when I heard the word cancer, I imagined a difficult treatment and a painful battle. I was extremely anxious about the future ahead of me. And during such times, the person who came to my mind was Jack. I thought the love had completely cooled, but somewhere deep inside I might have still wanted to face Jack and spend time as a married couple. Given my current weakened state, even someone as cold as Jack, who never once showed concern for me, might worry. He might ask,
"Are you okay?"
He might say kind words. Just one visit would have been enough. I wanted to see Jack's face, even if it was just once. I wondered if he struggled with daily life without me around. Now I felt guilty for not being able to do household chores, but no matter how many days I waited, Jack never showed up. My messages were marked as read, but not even a simple reply like "okay," let alone the words "are you okay," was sent back to me. It felt as if he didn't care about me at all. Despite my cancer, despite how weak I had become, Jack showed no signs of caring about me. This reality weighed heavily on my mind, and it was unbearably painful. I know I was foolish to have expectations, but was it so wrong to want my husband to care for me when I'm struggling? Where did it all go wrong? I never intended to burden Jack. I simply wanted him to worry about me, to care for me, just a little bit. Even that small selfishness wasn't allowed to me. I should stop expecting anything from Jack. With that resolution, I fiercely battled my cancer. As expected, the fight was sheer agony. The medication administered was undoubtedly breaking my body down, and I spent countless nights unable to sleep due to the pain. Several times I considered stopping the treatment, letting my deteriorating body continue to break down and just facing the end. Every time my parents would say, "It will definitely get better," and because of those encouraging words, even when my will faltered, I managed to push through and make it to today. One day, while I felt unwell and was blankly staring at the ceiling from my bed, the door to my room suddenly swung open. I wasn't expecting my parents to visit that day, so I wondered who it could be. I turned my gaze and saw Jack. Had he finally come to see how I was, out of concern? Seeing how emaciated and drained I had become, wouldn't he despise me even more? Numerous thoughts raced through my mind, rendering me speechless. Ignoring my reaction, Jack sat down on the chair next to my bed, quietly observed me, and then laughed.
"So, cancer does this to you, huh? You look terrible. Hardly like a woman at all."
Those words sent a chilling shiver down my spine. Of all things, he shouldn't have said that to someone who's still battling cancer. I wished he would just shut up. But disregarding my feelings, Jack continued with even more hurtful words.
"Ever since you've been gone, every day has been wonderful. Sure, the house is a mess, but I hardly ever go home. Life without you is surprisingly easy."
Jack's cruel words wounded me further. Why did I have to hear such words? Why wasn't there a single comforting word from him? I wanted to lash out at Jack, but my weakened body wouldn't cooperate, leaving me any choice but to quietly absorb his painful remarks. I stared at Jack with vacant eyes. Noticing my gaze, Jack chuckled mockingly. Then he said something utterly unbelievable.
"By the way, I've already filed for divorce. I'm taking the house as property division. You don't get a say in it."
The room seemed to spin at his words. He filed for divorce without my consent? Why? Before I could gather my thoughts, Jack continued.
"I've fallen in love with someone else. She's 20 years younger than me, but I'm serious about her. You're in the way of us being together."
Does this mean he had an affair? Such thoughts raced through my mind, but Jack, perhaps having said his piece, began to prepare to leave. Wait! But Jack paid no heed. There was no love left for me in Jack's heart anymore. The pain in my chest became so intense that I just didn't care anymore. Fine. With that one sentence from me, Jack left the room with a satisfied smile. After that, I fought even harder against my illness. Even with all the pain, I was determined to fully recover from cancer and became even more dedicated to my treatment. And so 2 days passed. It might seem short, but to me, who could hardly sleep at night, those 2 days felt very long. I was tormented with uncertainty. Did Jack really finalize the divorce as he said, or were his words just meant to play on my anxieties? Perhaps there was no divorce at all? The one thing that kept me going was a secret plan to completely expose Jack. I knew once he found out about it, even someone as cold-blooded as Jack would be shuttered. I believed that a flustered Jack would surely try to contact me. With that in mind, I waited, and sure enough, Jack called me today. I couldn't take the call in my hospital room, so I ignored the first hundreds of calls. He didn't seem to give up trying to reach me. Despite my phone being on silent mode, the constant vibrations were annoying, so I texted him, "Stop calling, it's annoying." Finally, the calls ceased. But then the messages started pouring in.
"Please, I want to talk. Just once. I'll apologize for everything."
And many more. If he couldn't reach me by call, he'd tried to text. Every single message was clearly out of self-preservation. Perhaps Jack had realized why I had so readily accepted the unilateral divorce.
"Can I come see you?"
When I didn't respond, Jack, perhaps growing impatient, sent that message. Honestly, given my current exhaustion from fighting my illness, the idea of meeting Jack was almost torturous. However, I figured if I declined, he'd incessantly call, so I replied, "Fine." My revenge plot was about to begin. Jack, who had treated me poorly for so long and even forced me to divorce, deserves a harsh punishment. Eagerly anticipating Jack's arrival, I was determined to bring him down.
Hey, what the hell are you thinking?
With that outburst, Jack entered my hospital room. His voice clearly revealed his panic, showing that he was already feeling cornered. To an outsider, Jack's reaction might seem a bit over the top, but it was only natural for him to be this frantic. After all, I had a secret ace up my sleeve.
I had no idea you had assets worth $6 million. If I knew about this money, I wouldn't have... Why didn't you tell me?
Saying this, Jack placed my bank book on the table. The book clearly showed that I had over $1 billion saved up. Well, you never asked.
Who would imagine that a housewife like you would have this kind of money? If I had known about this money, I would have never divorced you.
Maybe you shouldn't have impulsively forced me to divorce.
Don't play games with me. And where did you even get this kind of money from?
Jack, who unilaterally divorced me without my consent, was now complaining that he'd have acted differently if he'd known about my $6 million. It was so self-centered of Jack to assert he'd have changed his decision if he had known about the money. I decided it was time to let Jack in on the secret. Actually, the source of this $6 million was from investments I began as a mere pastime. The one who suggested I try investing was my parents. Although Jack's salary alone was enough for us as a couple to live comfortably, I always wanted to contribute something to our finances. My father was knowledgeable about investments, and when I expressed interest, he taught me hands-on how to invest. Under my father's guidance, I began investing little by little, initially aiming to make even a small profit. I first started investing about 5 years ago. Since then, I've honed my skills considerably. Now I've become so proficient that even my father exclaims,
I never thought you'd grow this much.
The $6 million recorded in the passbook Jack brought was the profit I earned over those 5 years. I was going to tell you eventually, but then cancer hit me and you suddenly started to claim divorce. What could have been done? I never intended to take this secret to the grave. Once I recovered from cancer and could return to a normal life, I had planned to confide in Jack about the $6 million, and, as a couple, intended to share the money to ensure our life together. But before that could happen, Jack made the unilateral decision to divorce. It would be absurd to share the money with someone who's no longer my husband. Given the circumstances, all $6 million will probably be mine. Hearing my story, Jack's face turned red with rage.
If I had known you had this much money, I wouldn't have divorced. You're at fault for not revealing it immediately. Pay me alimony right now. $6 million. Compensate for the sin of keeping secrets from your husband.
Faced with such a vast sum, Jack seems to be either overwhelmed or simply unable to accept that he won't be getting the money. Either way, he's making outrageous demands. Now that we're divorced, no matter how things turn out, there's absolutely no way I'm giving the $6 million to Jack. And yet Jack is so desperate to get his hands on the $6 million right in front of him. He's saying absolutely unthinkable things. I couldn't help but chuckle.
What are you laughing at?
Jack said,
Enough with the disrespect. I've always been irritated by your attitude. Did you ever think it's arrogant for a wife to have such wealth? A wife's assets are her husband's. So, you should hand over these assets to me.
What do you mean a wife's assets belong to the husband? I never intended to keep the existence of this money hidden forever. It's just that you went ahead and divorced me before I could reveal it.
Stop making excuses. It's all your fault for keeping secrets.
Even though I don't recall making any ridiculous excuses, every time I speak, Jack turns bright red, accuses, blames, and belittles me. Frankly, as someone recovering from illness, Jack's shouting is hard to bear. It resonates in my head unbearably. It was clear that trying to discuss anything further would be futile. No matter what I say, Jack would probably never listen and continue to paint me as the villain. Once I realized that it was impossible to reason with Jack, my next move was swift. Please, stop it. You were the one who went ahead and divorced, right? You forced me to divorce, remember? I always knew you were cruel, but I never imagined you'd go this far. When one reaches their limit, can they really become this enraged? What I feel now is not the pain from cancer, but anger towards Jack. Raising my voice this way will undoubtedly affect my body, but my anger towards this selfish person who, while shamelessly sitting beside my bed and blaming me with every word he could think of, was unstoppable. When I was diagnosed with cancer, what do you think went through my mind? I thought maybe now Jack would worry about me a bit, that he might change his ways and start caring for me. Yet what did you do? You didn't visit me in the hospital, and when you finally did, you filed for divorce and claimed our house. Now that you know about my wealth, you come and blame me like this? Are you kidding me? I'll say it again. I never intended to keep it a secret forever. I was waiting for the right time to tell you. You destroyed that chance. I had never blamed Jack in this manner before. I always accepted Jack's selfish actions, thinking that we were a married couple and should stay together. Without making any complaints or holding any resentment, I always did my best for him. The reason I still wanted to make it work was because of my love for Jack. I truly loved him. But now, I feel no love for Jack. All I feel is an uncontrollable anger and disbelief towards a man who only says selfish things. How did he become so selfish? What kind of education does one receive to become such a person, completely devoid of consideration for others? While I am at a loss for words and utterly appalled, I realize it is futile to question this, as a person who would engage in infidelity, proceed with a divorce without consent, and expect sane reasoning from them is beyond comprehension.
Please, I'm begging you. She says she'll definitely divorce me unless I bring her $6 million, knowing that you have that amount. If I can't get that money from you, I'll be left all alone. You still love me, don't you? Don't you want to help me?
It seems that the woman Jack was cheating with has also found out about my $6 million in assets. He must have told her. From what I've heard from Jack, it appears that his mistress is also quite greedy. Birds of a feather flock together, I suppose. I couldn't help but think that they are well suited for each other, to such an extent that Jack's circumstances and whatever suffering he might endure in the future no longer mattered to me, and I was able to completely detach myself from him.
I'm really begging you. I'll do anything. Please, give me $6 million. If not, I'm going to be in big trouble. Please, help me out.
Saying so, Jack knelt down on the spot, begging me for it. I had never seen Jack this desperate before, and his state seemed utterly ridiculous to me. At the same time, I felt a mix of disappointment and despair, akin to the feelings of having been let down because he never showed such desperation for me. The more we talked, the colder my feelings for Jack became. I couldn't help but feel that continuing the conversation was pointless. The more I interacted with this rotten man, the more I became certain that it would not lead to my happiness. I couldn't help but think that I was foolish for suffering and struggling for such a selfish man, and for expecting, even during my illness, that he might show his face someday. Despite my feelings, Jack continued to beg desperately, saying,
Please, I'm begging you.
And,
help me.
Listening to Jack's words any longer became the most painful thing for me. Please leave. As I said this, Jack began to plead.
Don't say things like that.
Adopting a buttering up attitude. Even that was unbearable to me at this point. I pressed the nurse call button and called the nurse. After explaining the situation and asking them to remove Jack, the nurse called the security guard and Jack was escorted out.
Please, just hear me out. You're the only one who can help.
He kept declaring this until the end, but I completely shut out his words. Even after that, Jack frequently visited the hospital. However, since the nurses were aware of the situation, he was never allowed to enter my room. According to my friends, since Jack couldn't secure the $6 million, the woman he had an affair with proposed a divorce, and now he's single. On the other hand, I continued to bravely fight against my cancer, and just recently I was declared completely healed and was able to be discharged from the hospital. Thanks to overcoming my illness, my body now feels invigorated. The sensation of being healthy again is more precious than anything else. Currently, I'm using a portion of the $6 million I have saved up, and I'm leading a relaxed life. To be honest, I'm already 50 and have had enough of marriage. I think I'll probably live out the rest of my life alone. I feel there's nothing wrong with living my life unbound by anyone.